Hey guys, James Wilson Taylor here for Rock Sound. It's the latest of our video calls where we've been chatting to everybody while we're all at home at the minute. And I'm delighted to say from the Dirty Nil, we've got Luke on the line. How are you, man?
I'm very well. How are you?
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. We've started most of these off in kind of the same way, which is to say, of course, hope you've been keeping safe, keeping well. Same to all your loved ones out there. And just generally, how have these last few months at home been for you, man? How you been occupying yourself?
Well, I mean, it's actually been it has not been too bad for me. I can very much so admit. I mean, we when we finished our record in the beginning of April, we just basically threw ourselves into figuring out how we were going to promote it, and produce some stuff, some content to support it because the basic divergent set of opinions that we were hearing was we're going to try and do what we can to support our album, or B, we're going to sit on it and wait until this whole thing kind of blows over. And that's just kind of what our peers were doing. Those are the two trains of thoughts that we saw, and we definitely decided on the former because having when we did our first album, it took a long time to come out, and I never really wanted to do anything like that ever again. I'd rather leap into the unknown and see what happens and then move forward than sit around and wait. That's never an appealing strategy to me in the world of rock and roll. So basically, to answer your question in a long and rambling way, we've just kind of spent the year doubling down and basically figuring out what we can do with the current constraints. And we've done it with that really filled up the calendar, basically thinking and trying to implement solutions to our predicament. But I'm very proud of the stupid things that we've made this year to support our lovely album.
Yeah, no, it's cool to see the kind of varying different ways that all the bands that are in a similar position to yourself have taken on that challenge. How do you connect with a fan base when you can't get in the same room as them? Because we all know playing live is kind of the first and foremost one that you'd always do in that way to connect with the fans in the most direct fashion. What was the thought process, I guess, for you guys? How did those initial ideas of what you were going to do to support from afar start to come together? And what were the challenges there as well?
Well, I mean, this whole thing really kicked off into high gear while we were making our album. And so, I mean, I think there's a bands work in different ways, but our band works in a way where we rehearse our music intensely for about a year before we set foot into a recording studio. We don't go into a studio with a producer and have them hold our hand and help us make our songs for us in the studio. We know what our songs are, and we blast them out in a concrete room for a year before we get into a room. So I'm only saying that because just to give some context about why we were so determined to finish it, because so much work had gone into it previously, that I wasn't really prepared to abandon and postpone. I'd rather finish this thing on a yak back recorder than postpone for 6 months or a year or whatever it was going to be. So our producer's from Seattle, and he basically, once we finished the drums and the bass, he had to take the last flight out of Canada, go back to Seattle. So I was faced with the decision of, well, you have 2 days if you want to try and track all the guitars with you and the engineer here, no producer, or we can postpone indefinitely. And so I chose the first option, and it was a hell done. And we were very exhausted by the end, but we were able to take the record to the next stage and do the vocals from home and send them out to Seattle and have John kind of produce from afar. But when I started talking around to other bands and saying, I know this band was recording. What's your plan? Are you guys putting your record out? And everyone's like, no, we're battening down the hatches. It's not worth it. There's nothing to do. Like, we're just going to wait this thing out. I just thought that's a total loser attitude. No offense, but I think you got to go out there and grab what you can while you can. And there's no guarantees that this is going to blow over anytime soon. So we just treated this like any other year with some obvious constraints, and we had a lot of fun. And we have a really good team around us in terms of video team and everything. So we just immediately got to work brainstorming ways that we could make up for the fact that we couldn't tour. And so, yeah, it was a quick and snappy set of decisions that we basically said, okay, well, we're going to put out a record on New Year's Eve because nothing matters. Who cares? And, also, I would rather just roll the dice and see what happens, and see what, we don't know what kind of territory we're heading into releasing our album without being able to tour and support it. But I would rather do that than wait a year until I'm sick of the songs and don't really believe in them anymore. You know, I that's, as I said, I was affected by earlier experiences in our band where we made a record, and it took us a while to get a label, and like it took a while to get it mixed, and then we had to push the date back. And by the time it came out, I didn't even recognize the band coming through the stereo speakers. And I think we're all determined to not repeat that kind of set of circumstances. I think we'd rather just release our album while we're really excited about it, and just do what we can and come up with some creative ways to support it. So, you know, we did a virtual tour where we partnered up with our favorite venues across the United States and split the money with them to try and help keep them alive, or at least put a modest amount of money into their coffers at a time like this. And then we did some bizarre promotional things like a cameo campaign, asking all the I would say the most kind of like D-level celebrities that we could find to review our music, which was pretty funny. And then we've done a bunch of music videos outside. We were all actually living together as a band, so it allowed us to do quite a bit more than the average band during this whole thing. But yeah, we've had a very active year in terms of doing stuff because, as I said, we had some certain advantages, but my brain works in a way where sitting and doing nothing is just not a possibility for me.
Well, I imagine as well, you know, you said there you didn't want to get sick of the songs. I would imagine if you've already spent a year, like you say, your working process is hammering out those tracks, they're going to be at a place where you get in the recording studio and they're so fresh, they're so there. It's not like you have that extended period where you're freshly discovering something. You really don't want things to get stale in that case.
Exactly. It's like we kind of time things out rehearsal wise so that they're ripe and ready to pick at that moment. But if either side, it's either too green and hard or too mushy and soft. It has to be picked at that point.
Yeah, gotta nail the moment. Yeah.
Exactly. Even if I have to just do it with my voice memo on my cell phone, that's how it has to happen. Like, that's the time. So yeah, I mean, stopping was never really, postponing or stopping was never really a pondered option for us.
No, good for you, man. Good for you. I mean, you know, certainly got some advantages there, all living together and stuff. But you know, absolutely make the best of what you can in this very very odd time. It's been cool to see, and let's talk about the album, man. I want to start with the title. I love asking people about titles because I'm, you know, I say it in all of these, but it is always feels often like it's a mission statement when someone has an album title. Never a more provocative one than your next record. The record is, of course, titled "Fuck Art." Tell me about that. Where did that statement come from? Okay. Why do you think it sums it up?
So, well, first of all, I guess I'll just give the backstory on the whole thing. But last Christmas, my mom got me and my sisters painting lessons for Christmas and said, "You have no choice. You're coming painting with me. That's it. You're coming painting." So I was like, "Well, I haven't painted since I was in high school. I wasn't really all that excited about it. I was just like, whatever." It was me and my sister and a bunch of retirees, including my mom. It was a lovely, kind of very polite crowd, and with a very experienced and seasoned teacher who was basically just leading this class of people down at the community center through the most basic watercolor movements and techniques. And I had this illusion before this class that, you know, people get to an age where they kind of have life more or less figured out and they stop being whiny babies. But, you know, there was an older man who completely shattered these illusions for me, because he would complain between every brushstroke, his hand would shoot up like a 6-year-old and say, "Mine doesn't look like that. Why doesn't mine look like that?" Or, "I got a bristle struck in my page," and the whole class kind of collectively felt a little tightened up because of this one gentleman who was probably like 73 years old. And it got to the point where the instructor was clearly running out of gas for dealing with these somewhat petulant comments and submissions from this fella. So she basically said, "Finish your painting, we'll talk after." And you heard him put his brush down, because the whole class is silent, everyone's painting. And I just heard him mutter, "Fuck art." And then I told that to the band at we played a show in January. So this is one of the first lessons he did that. And I told that to the band when we were in the green room, like right before we were playing. And we had a couple beers because it was like a college gig, and like it was just a good atmosphere. We were having a fun time. And I told it to the band, and we all just kind of started chanting it to each other. Like, imagine we called our album that. It was kind of a dare. And then it became our battle cry. To me, the title, even though in its literal interpretation is somewhat nihilistic and negative, to me it's incredibly jubilant and optimistic, and it's almost impossible to say and not smile. Even my parents, who begged me to not call it that, and my sister.
Did they really say, like, please don't title the album that?
There is actually I tried to find it. I accidentally deleted it because I wanted to put it on the record, but a message from my mom, like my phone message, like, "Hey Luke, I've been thinking, and I really don't think you should call your album Fuck Art." Like,
oh man, that would have been the perfect intro.
I don't know what happened.
So good.
I know. Anyways, it's gone. But there is a voice message or two on the record. Anyways, we got a couple things in there. So, anyways, it's to me, just the sheet, like it's a multi-purpose title. There's things that I just love about it. Like, obviously the origin story of it's funny. The implicit experience of saying it and seeing it is like, it's just mischievous and fun and brings joy to all who say it. And the third thing is like a bit of a literal commentary on there's a lot of just like completely self-indulgent garbage parading under the banner of art, and we are I think we're pretty blue collar in our approach to rock and roll and music in general and art. And so this is kind of our kind of grinning, trolling statement about the whole thing as we see it.
I'm glad you mentioned how fun it is to say and everything, because that was like my first, it might sound kind of obvious or a basic comment, but listening to the record, my first thought was, oh man, this is really fun. This is a fun album. And it's definitely seeped in a lot of inspiration ports from bands that I really grew up loving. I hear a lot of Weezer on there, correct me if I'm wrong on there, but like I hear a lot of Weezer, a lot of that kind of a lot of kind of 80s rock and stuff in there, but with a bit of a modern twist on it. And it's just fun record, and definitely the kind of escapist thing I think people need right now in a lot of ways. Talk to me about the kind of inspiration points in there, particularly in writing these singles, which again, I think really harken back to that guitar era of maybe the early 90s in a way.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a certain amount of DNA, like Weezer in our DNA forever. That was what we were listening to when we were kids, and that's what taught us how to play our instruments and how to write songs, basically how to write like that in Nirvana and the Who and kind of more classic rock bands. But the 90s was a really big influence for us, that we were little children and we kind of discovered it retroactively when all that stuff happened. But yeah, I mean, that's in terms of kind of inspiration for us. I think that a lot of our peers are trying to make these like really dark, heavy, like brooding sentiments, and I think we didn't time it out like this to be part of the whole pandemic and everything, but like I think that we view ourselves as entertainers, and we're here to make people feel good. And that's what rock and roll is all about. So that's kind of why we also really doubled down on that title. We're not, I'm just not really into like self-indulgent sadness and all that kind of I think it's a given that life is full of pain and suffering for every single person that experiences it. And it's more fun to crack jokes at the gallows than it is to point out that you've got a noose around your neck. You know, that's not a political statement or anything. I'm just a gallows humor comment from the old English tradition. But
Yeah.
that's kind of our view on we just like to have fun, and like a kind of dark kind of fun, which is it's the best kind of fun.
Absolutely.
But in terms of inspiration, specific sonic things, you know, we were listening to a lot of thrash music. Like we were really listening to a lot of early Metallica, and Slayer, obviously, and Cro-Mags and Turnstile. Turnstile is like, I think, one of our favorite modern bands as a band. Like, we all have different tastes and things, but there's a few bands that we all really get behind. That's like that we the three of us are kind of united as one fan behind Turnstile. And there's a couple other bands like that, but that's the big one for us, I'd say, at the moment. And we're listening to Ross brought this band, showed us this band called Candy, who is just like the most brutal hardcore band I think I've ever heard. Like, the recordings are so savage, and they're called Candy, which is a hilarious name. But they have this song called Lust for Destruction that we were just listening to so much whenever we were driving around. But also, you know, we were listening to a lot of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, kind of earlier stuff, Damn the Torpedoes. And so that's kind of why there's, like, you know, there's definitely some moments of thrash metal on the record, which we've never really ever done before. But then there's also acoustic guitars within the same song. I think we generally as a band are really interested in being mischievous and challenging, and just doing whatever the hell we want in general. As kind of tired and stereotypical as that sounds, I think that one of the problems with modern rock music is that people really kind of just like get divided and focused on focused lines of, well, this is what we do and we don't do that, and this is what we do, and, you know, but we will reference Missy Elliott and you know, Led Zeppelin within the same song. It doesn't matter, as long as it amuses us, we'll play it.
Yeah,
So,
it's a good attitude to have. I think that's something that's been creeping in a lot more in rock music in the last couple of years, to be fair. Like, just that idea of, yeah, you don't have to sit in one lane with your influences. You can mix it up and you can make it work for you. It's just whatever you want to play.
Yeah, it's like, how many more bands do we need with black leather jackets that sound like the Ramones? Like, you know, it's like, it's totally fine to rip people off, but you got to rip off more people, basically. Like, everybody's ripping people off, for sure. There's nothing original ever. It's just like, who you rip off and how you rip them off is the real art to it.
There's something there. There is something there for sure. I think that makes sense, man. And you mentioned it before, you know, the record coming out on New Year's Eve. I imagine, you know, that sense of, you wanted to create something fun that's not wallowing in despair that we've all been in. I mean, that's sort of the most appropriate date you could kind of put it out on, in a way.
Yes, and I think that when it became clear that the whole infrastructure that we had traditionally known around, you know, live music and everything was shutting down, I think a lot, like, there's a clear path of despair on that. But my mind, honestly, you know, back to your first question about how I'm dealing with this whole year, I've felt the most energized and engaged with the landscape than I ever have. I'm the most I've ever had positive, like, just optimism and a sense of connection and drive. I've never felt it like feel it this year, because things are so up in the air and we're so used to doing the same cycle of things. You know, you tour forever, you put out, or you go in and you make a record, and then you tour forever, and then you take a couple of weeks off, and then you do another, you know, it just, so this kind of complete scrapping of the traditional habit or the traditional pattern of things has made me feel like a new person, and in a really good way. I feel so much more creative. I don't have to I love touring, of course, I love playing shows, but I don't have to gear myself up into the mindset of like, okay, well, you're going to be in a van for 6 months now, so you know, prepare for that. It's just like, okay, well, no, we can just sit around being creative and thinking about how we're going to promote this whole thing. And so that New Year's Eve just seemed like a perfect kind of thing. We were going to try and do we had some more ambitious plans of trying to do some kind of distanced show, but you know, it's you know, restrictions and numbers kept moving in a direction where we basically had to get realistic with things and keep it distanced. But I have to be honest though, like I haven't really found much of this depressing personally. It's been, as I said, very engaging as the new challenges come. And I mean, everyone's had their moments of like, God, this is fucking boring. But you know, I think that I just, from my own personal experiences, and again, I'm very fortunate we have the team that we have, but I've just felt super engaged and motivated to just keep working because there's nothing else to do, you know?
No,
it's not
it's
like
true.
I can go see movies and stuff.
I know. We wish. God, remember that? Remember movie theaters, kids? Remember those? Long
Yeah,
time
or
back.
bars.
Yeah, oh, dude, don't get me started on the pub. But like that is something I want to kind of leave you with then, because it's good to hear you've kind of got that creative flair going, and that's still keeping with you when you're stuck at home at this time. How's that affected your writing and stuff? Because normally you would not have this time to be writing any more new music. You would be out there on the road promoting this album that isn't even out yet. But has that downtime and that creativity spurred any more ideas for what might come next?
100% it has. And that's the other reason why I feel so happy this year, I have to say, is because personally, and I've always been this way since I started playing guitar and started working on music, was my optimism and outlook on life was intrinsically tied to how many new songs or new ideas or riffs or whatever I had in my back pocket that no one else had heard. And so the experience of making it, I'm just one of those people that just like, I have to tinker forever. I have to work on it every day, but I have to tinker forever to kind of get things, my contributions, at least, like lyrics and chords and riffs and stuff, to a place where I really, really like them. And I go crazy about, you know, the arrangements of songs with the band, and we all kind of contribute. But as I said, like being able to just make an album, traditionally we would make an album and then we'd tour it, and then slowly the existential dread would creep in while we were on the road of like, you don't have any new songs, what are you going to do about that? And like the longer you go, it's like any muscle, you know, it's just like, it's hard to get back in shape once you've let your arms turn to spaghetti. But this time we finished the record and I was like, great, what's next? And then I just set up my amp again and just, I really have to say that this is the most fun that I've had playing and writing music in a very long time, because it's the first time that I felt like no clocks. It's the first time I've gotten back to the whole experience without any kind of deadline, because we haven't even put out our record yet. But I mean, for a lot of people, this is just standard affair. This is how they always do it. But for me, I'm just writing is a big and intense experience for the most part, of like tinkering and working on things. And so for this time, for me to just have the time to just explore and figure out what I like about electric guitar and lyrics and everything has been, that's the reason why I'm so happy right now, is because, or one of them is because I've been super busy just writing music, and I have not had the luxury of doing that since I was 22. Because I can't really write on the, like, I can't really work on songs on the road. Like,
Sure.
If we're headlining and I'm singing for an hour, like, you know, full tilt, an hour a night, every day in the van, I'm just sitting there like drinking tea and like, just trying to get to the next show. I don't have any
ready.
excess. Exactly. And we're doing interviews and we're doing sessions and driving to this and driving to that. There's no extra time to be like, hey, what am I thinking about in the key of G today? There's no time to do any of that shit. So being at home with my amp set up and my guitar leaned against it, I can just do that all day. It's fantastic. So as I said, my outlook and optimism and my existential happiness is intrinsically tied to how much new grain I have in the silo, and the silo is looking real good. So I'm real happy.
Man. No, that's really exciting, man. I'm glad you're keeping creative and glad you got all that stuff ready to go, really. But in the meantime, this record's about to drop, man. Congrats on that. And we just look forward to seeing you guys in the UK for shows and stuff whenever that's going to be allowed. But in the meantime, stay safe out there. All the love to you and your loved ones.
Well, likewise, and keep the Gregs warm for us. We can't wait to get back. Steak bake is the greatest fast food item on the face of the earth.
I was going to ask what your Greg's item is of choice, but there we go. The steak bake, and that is a solid choice. I will give you that.
The steak bake forever. I could eat those for the rest of my life. It would be a shorter life, but I would eat them for the rest of my life.
But what a life it would be. Oh, what a life.
What a life it would be. Exactly.
Luke, good to chat to you, man. Appreciate it.
Great to talk to you too.